So I might not make most of these recipes ever again. Definitely the last one, but I'm still really happy that I tested them out. And the first carnivore recipe that me and Jericho tried is beef bread, meat bread. I don't know which one's funnier to say. Whenever I say beef bread, I just think of Cartman, beefcake. But anyway, I actually made this beef bread my first month being in this carnivore diet, and I made it every single week. It was super helpful back then because I was still kind of dealing with cravings, and I'm not here to say that it tastes like bread, but it is definitely a good enough replacement because it looks like bread, the texture is kind of like bread. So I'll put links to the recipes in the description if you're interested. But this time around I did it a little differently. So originally when I was making the beef bread, I followed the recipe exactly. So it's raw meat and then eggs and salt and ghee. This time around, and then you cook it in the oven for like more than 2 hours. This time around, I sauteed and cooked the meat first, drained it and let it sit because the drier that it is, the easier and better it'll cook. Otherwise you'll have like super soggy. Maybe you'll have like beef bread pudding or something. It sounds so gross. But it came out good. It does fall a little bit, so it doesn't there's no rising, there's no leavening. I mean, I guess the leaven maybe would be the egg whites because you beat them. I have a hand mixer that I use so that they have like the stiff peaks. But Jericho really liked it. I was surprised. I like sat down with it and Jericho was like, yeah, I want some of that. And even though it's cooked. So it is convenient. Like I said, in the first month, I made it every week and I would eat that for breakfast with some butter and yogurt. That was kind of my way of weaning off of my previous diet that had a lot of carbohydrates, mostly plants. So it was useful then, but I would say like coming back to it now, I probably will never make it again, but I'm still glad that I did make it. The reason that I'll probably never make it again is just because I still get into that binge mode. It's so weird. It's like a psychological like trigger, just like that relationship that we have with food. It's like more emotional and like psychological than it is based on hunger. So like true hunger. So I would want more of the beef bread, the meat bread, even though I didn't need more food. I wasn't hungry. I was stuffed, I had a full meal and I was satiated, but I didn't have that feeling because of the look and the texture of it. But again, I'm glad that I made it because now I know like I don't need that anymore. Whereas when I have a day of where I'm just eating my ground beef or maybe steak with butter and eggs and salt, that's it. I don't have those false triggers of I need to eat. I was like, I feel hungry, I eat, and then I'm satiated, and that's that. So the next carnivore recipe that me and Jericho tried is meatballs, and I used the beef bread. I toasted that in the oven and then ground it up into a fine powder, and that was my quote-unquote breadcrumbs that I used. So for the meatballs, I just did the ground beef, egg, and some of the breadcrumbs and some salt. So I just baked that in the oven, and then me and Jericho had that with some ricotta cheese. I didn't give any of the cheese to Jericho, but he liked the meatballs and he liked the beef bread. But I don't know, the meatballs came out kind of tough, and that could just because I added too much of the beef bread, but it was a good experience. I'm glad I did it because that just showed me that my very simple ground beef, butter, and eggs is all I need. I don't need to like make these. Meatballs aren't that extravagant, but I was excited about having ricotta cheese again because I cut out all types of dairy for month 2 and month 3. Right now I'm in month 4. So I was excited to have it again because I was like, oh, it was so good. And I get it from the farmer's market, regenerative farming, grass-fed, grass-finished. So it's like the best of the best, it's massaged. I'm just kidding. But it was really good. When I had it this time around, it was good, but not as good as I remember. So it's interesting to see how my taste buds are changing because But again, this time I had that psychological signal of like, oh, I want more, even though I didn't need more, even though I wasn't hungry for more. So again, I'm glad that I tried it. Probably won't ever make it again, but definitely glad that I did, because like it just proved to me that I don't need these things. And when I'm eating it, I'm like, it's okay. But honestly, I was like, I just prefer my ground beef, butter, and eggs. It's so funny. It's so weird. The next carnivore recipe that I tried is sardine bites. So I've been trying to incorporate sardines more into my diet because they're just a very big superfood. And this is the third time that I've had sardines, I think. The previous two times, I just mixed it up with hard-boiled eggs and butter. So this time I made the ketogenic woman, Anita, her sardine bites, and I used the meat bread instead. She uses pork rinds. I don't eat pork. So I used the beef bread again as the breadcrumbs, to soak up the moisture from the eggs. And I made them into patties. She uses the air fryer. I made them into patties. I kind of flattened them out and then threw them on top of the stove and just pan fried them. They were kind of dry. Jericho, of course, loved them. He loves sardines. Like as soon as I open the can, he comes running. He's like ravenous when it comes to sardines. I mean, he loves all of his food, but especially with sardines. But they came out a little dry. Again, it could just be because I did drain them a lot, and maybe I used too much of the beef breadcrumbs. But it did taste better. Like each time I have sardines, they taste better and better. So it's like I'm not saying ugh as much, so I'm getting used to it. I also made Anita's recipe for carnivore mayo. So I used egg yolks, apple cider vinegar, and melted butter and salt. I chose not to use the mustard because I wanted to share some with Jericho, like just in case he had some. So I just used the eggs, butter, and apple cider vinegar and salt. And the butter mayo comes out really good. It does harden in the refrigerator, duh, because there's butter in it. But it does have that like tangy type taste. And I used to love mayonnaise. Oh my gosh. And when I was making this, I remembered that I used to eat mayonnaise on toast. So I'm like, oh, now I can do that again. But I probably won't make that bread again, like I said, because of that psychological trigger. The butter mayo is definitely good, and I'm going to continue to make that. Maybe the next time I have sardines, I'll just do the butter mayo and just plain sardines instead of making the bites. I think the bites, maybe they're a good way to like introduce and wean yourself onto sardines. But again, I'm happy that I made it. Probably won't make it again, but I'm glad that I did because it just kind of shows me that like the extra work of like doing a recipe, not that it takes all day, but it's just extra than just eating it out of the can. So for me, it's like, well, doing those extra steps doesn't really matter because it's still kind of tastes pretty much the same to me. So I'd rather just cut out those extra steps and then just dip it with some butter mayo and eat it straight out of the can, like Jericho does. The next recipe that I made, the next carnivore recipe that I made that I will definitely make again is liver pate. So this was the very first time that I made liver pate. And again, I used Ketogenic Woman's recipe, sauteed. Well, actually first I rinsed it and soaked the livers in water. And then I rinsed them again. And then I sauteed them on the stovetop with butter. And then I did maybe like a third of a pound of liver. Her recipe calls for an entire pound to 1 stick of butter. I still used a stick of butter to like a third of a pound of liver because it was my first time making it. So I was like, let me just overdo it with the butter just to, kind of ease my way into it. So I made it with that, and then shout out to Spiral Flesh. She told me to put egg yolks, or that she said egg yolks taste good with liver. So I said that I would do that. So I put 3 egg yolks into the liver pate. So once it was cooled, I put it in the blender with the egg yolks and blended it. Next time I'm going to add salt as well. So I did like the liver pate, and I made that with lamb tongue and lamb heart. So I boiled it and then simmered it for about 2 hours. I might cook it a little more next time because the skin wasn't as easy to peel off of the lamb tongues. Slice them up and then fry them so they're like meat chips. I like them. I don't know. I think it's good, and including the muscular organs is good too for the diet. Jericho liked the chips. He ate some of my fried chips, even though I gave him the unfried, just the boiled version of the chips. Interestingly, though, he didn't go for the liver pate. I'm surprised. Also, I would say, I forgot to mention before, when you're draining the liver, save those juices and give them to your cat, but don't give too much at once. I'd made that mistake and Jericho had a little bit of diarrhea because too much liquids, but also liver is extremely rich in nutrients, so you don't want to do too much. So I would say, like, I mean, it really depends on how much you have. I dispersed it out throughout a week, and that was too much. So 1/3 of a pound with whatever, how much of the liquids, I think it was maybe like 2 ounces or so. I would say maybe disperse that out over a longer period of time because it's very beneficial, but it's extremely nutrient dense, so you don't want to do too much of it. And the same goes with us. Like, liver is a superfood, but you don't want to have too much of it. It's very high in vitamin A, and vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, more likely to cause toxicity. So you just, you don't want to do too much. I think I've heard maybe like 2 ounces every other day. I made, let's see, it was like 1/3 of a pound. I don't know the maths right now, but it also had the butter in it, the full stick of butter and the 3 egg yolks. So it made much more volume than just the 1/3 of a pound. So I dipped the chips into it, ate it with some of my ground beef, and I was really surprised. I was thinking that I wasn't gonna like it at all, but I was like, this doesn't taste, it tasted, I didn't hate the taste of it, but as I ate more of it, it did taste good and definitely manageable considering how nutrient dense it is. The more that it sat in the refrigerator though, the stronger the taste of the liver became. But I also thought, like, what if I freeze it and then it'll be like liver ice cream? So I did that and it was like liver ice cream. But interesting here, it sounds so gross, liver ice cream, but it tasted good with the salt sprinkled on top. Very interesting here though. So I was talking about psychological trigger of like wanting the beef bread just because it looks like bread and the texture is bread, even though it doesn't taste like bread. Same with the ricotta cheese is like that emotional trigger of like, I want to eat more of it even though I don't need it. With the liver pate, okay, it does not taste, I'm not saying it tastes like this at all, but it looks like, to me, it looks like peanut butter chocolate mousse. It sounds so weird. It looks like, because it has like the airy kind of like smooth and like whipped almost texture. And it's like creamy because of the butter. Just because it looked like that and the texture was like that, I was more like incentivized to eat it. So it's really interesting. Like I think of peanut butter mousse, chocolate mousse, even though it's liver pate, but just that like trick of your mind. It's so bizarre. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it. But I'm gonna use that to my advantage. Like I just kept thinking it's peanut butter chocolate mousse, and then I would eat it, and I'm like, oh, okay, it doesn't taste like that, but it's like just kind of tricks my mind to think that it's like doesn't taste as strong as it does. But it tasted strongest like the last day that I ate it. So it was in the refrigerator. I think I made it on a Thursday. Oh no, I made it Wednesday, ate it Thursday because you chill it in the refrigerator, and then finished it on a Sunday. So a couple days worth of liver pate. Definitely gonna make it again. But I was surprised that Jericho didn't go for it, but he just prefers the raw liver, I guess. And you can check out this video right over Meow to see our 3-month results on the carnivore diet. Thanks for watching.